Hi there and welcome back to Japan, where I have a very, very special guest for today's podcast. It's nice that we get to talk to, you agree, right? It's nice that we get to talk
Very
to
nice.
people who work with music. But I think this is the first time I've spoken to someone who I would consider to be an experienced Japanese music journalist, in my opinion. I've read a lot of your stuff and you've been a very active
Thank you.
commenter. So, please introduce yourself and your wonderful experience.
Well, thank you so much for that nice introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is G. Andrew White for JRockNews.com. I am a live events and tour reporter for JRN. And thank you so much for those kind words. I really appreciate it. But I may disappoint you. I may end up proving that I'm not quite that experienced. I have an interesting backstory. But anyway, appreciate you so much for having me here. Let's just jump right into it. Where do we start from? What
Well,
can we do first?
that is a very good point. I think the best place to start, perhaps, is to give a little bit of context in that. I first knew you from the fact that you popped up in a few of the comments on our channel and you popped up on the Discord and things. And then it was, I can't remember, I don't think it was actually yourself. I think it was someone else who told me, you were very modest about it, told me that you had, that you were working actually as a journalist. And I went and I followed some of your stuff. Read some of the things you posted, and I've got to admit, we've had this conversation on previous podcasts that there is a little bit of a habit towards some fairly lowbrow journalism going on in both in the written and the video media. So I really enjoyed reading your stuff, and then your comments and everything. And I was like, okay, well, this is someone who's actually got some interesting opinions. So, one of the things that is worth me definitely asking, first of all, and this is a question I ask everyone here, but I'm really interested in your answer. How did you first get into Japanese music? Where did this interest come about for you?
Yeah, that is a very good question because in my experience, the people that I've talked to, I'm sure you've probably seen this as well, that there are a lot of people who came to it first through the anime. They were hearing the songs and the theme songs for their anime. Now, I have a bit of a different anecdote, and if we got the time for me to really lay out the story here, it's a bit of a yarn, so I'll try not to be too boring because I could probably boil it down into just a few seconds. But my experience was definitely different because even though I haven't always been a big fan of anime like a lot of other people who know the Japanese culture, I was just more of a fan of just the Japanese culture in general outside of anime, the history, and all their rich culture. So I always knew one day I was going to take a trip to Japan. It was that bucket list item, and I just couldn't wait anymore. So a few years ago, I said, okay, I'm doing it. I'm going to set the time, get the tickets, get the reservations, fly over there. And so in the process of preparing for that, I used this wonderful tool that we have here through the internet with YouTube and all this wonderful technology. I just started going online and doing some research to prepare for my trip. Things like, okay, get up to speed on some phrases, common expressions that I would probably need to know, what to look for, how to ride trains, all that kind of stuff. So
Good
I was just
preparation.
watching, yeah. Because I was going over there by myself, and so I didn't want to make a mistake into getting stranded and not being able to communicate with people. So I even did things like I printed up signs in Japanese for like a taxi cab. So if I got completely lost, I would just hand it to a taxi cab driver, and it's like, I need to go here, don't go.
That's a really good idea.
So in the process of just doing that research, at one point I was packing my bags. And I thought, I wonder what they're listening to over there these days. So I just went in and I typed up Japanese rock in the search bar, and a playlist came up. And I just let it play in the background while I went and did some packing. And while I was packing, I was like, oh, that's a cool song. And, everybody always says the same thing. It's like, well, I don't know the language. I don't know what they're singing about. So I kind of didn't think that it was going to be something that would apply to me. Because, I always knew that, they had their style of music, just like a lot of other places around the world that have lots of interesting styles of music with their culture. But I never thought before that it would be something that would apply to me. Because, I was a classic rock, hard rock, heavy metal guy growing up as a kid. I loved a lot of that stuff from back in the 80s and 90s. And I always kind of knew that there would be this kind of music in Japan, but I just never took the time to explore it. So I'm packing my bags. The playlist is just running, and it's all the big names that we talk about, these days. Think like some One OK Rock song came up in the Gazette.
So how long ago was this roughly?
So that was about a couple of years ago. See, this is where I go back to saying I don't really have that much experience, because this was just a couple of years ago that this all kind of happened. So I went off on my trip, had a great time in Japan. I did all the basic tourist stuff. And when I got back, I didn't think that I was going to go back to the music. But when I got back off the plane, there was something going on in my mind. It was like a string there that was just begging to be pulled on. So after I unpacked and everything, I just sat down and I got to that playlist again. I said, okay, what is it with this music? Why is it pulling me in? There's something about it here. Even though I'm not getting the language, I'm still getting something out of it. So I just let the playlist run. I paid a little bit more attention to who's coming up. And then I remember this moment. It was the one song, and I think a lot of people are having this experience these days. It was that Baby Metal, Give Me Chocolate song that came up, and I was just floored.
Yeah.
I was thinking, where has this been all my life? This amazing the backing band, as we all know for Baby Metal, the rhythm, the precision, the speed, and then of course you had the girls out front there singing. And now that I've known about them, Sue Metal, her voice, just so amazing. So I just went down this rabbit hole. I just started exploring as much as I can. It's like I want to learn about these people. Who are these guys? Who is the Gazette? Who is Darren Gray? Who is Man with the Mission? Why are they wearing wolf masks? And it was at the point that I was looking on the fan sites for band-maid, trying to figure out why these girls are wearing maid costumes and doing incredible hard rock. At some point, it was like, I'm hooked. I'm in. I'm bought in. OMG, this is my world now. So I just went deep dive into as much as I could find. I started doing all of that stuff to find, all the best music, started buying it, started putting it on, my playlist and everything, and just going in and devouring as much as I could. So anyway, I know I'm starting to ramble a little bit.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Told you this was kind of a long story. So the next logical question was, okay, now that I know these guys and gals, do they come to outside? Do they tour outside? This was, back in the long ago, before COVID shut everything down.
Yeah,
absolutely. A couple of years ago. I said, do these guys tour overseas? Do these guys travel around the world? Can I possibly see them when they come to my town? And sure enough, I started looking around, and it was hard to find some specific information like tour dates and things like that, because if you just search for like Japanese bands on tour, you usually end up just seeing dates in Japan. It's like, no, I got to find out if they're going to be close to me.
Yeah.
And I came across the website, jrocknews.com, and they had a list of some artists there on their tour pages. And I was like, oh, okay, so there's Scandal. Oh, I just missed them. See, there's the Gazette. No, I just missed them. So I kept that up in one window, and I went to another window to find some more information. I'm like, oh, hey, Baby Metal's coming to town. All right, I'm getting that.
That's a perfect choice. Yeah. Oh, so you
so it's like, there's Baby Metal, there's Band-Maid, and I'm looking at jrocknews.com, and it's like, oh, they must have missed these. So they had a email link there. If we're missing any dates, send us a link, info@jrocknews.com, and I said, I'm just going to let these guys know they probably forgot these dates over here. So I emailed that to them, and I found some other dates and emailed those as well, and then eventually they wrote me back from JRN. They said, hey, we've noticed that you've helped provide this information for us. Would you like to join our team and keep up with our tour pages? And I said, wow, sure, that sounds like a pretty neat gig, because it would give me an opportunity to explore this world some more.
That was a well-worded email, clearly.
Yeah. Well, so I got the email from the editor over there. She just invited me onto the team. And after that, when I got introduced to the rest of the team at J-Rock News, she said, okay, this is Andrew. He's our new tour page guy. And I kind of thought, well, that's got a nice ring to it, so I'll just be the tour page guy. So that's where I kind of started, just following the artists when they were doing their tours and other live events and keeping up on that. But I still felt like I had a little bit more to contribute. I still felt like I had something to add to the conversation. So after I got comfortable with doing edits for like the tour info, I said, do you guys mind if I write something? I would kind of like to do what you guys do and write a little bit, write some articles and reviews and things like that. And they said, sure, you just need to, follow our guidelines. They have a good set of guidelines to follow. And so I did that along with some basic just research in journalism. And actually, to drag out the story even more, I had a kind of already done this before in my youth. Actually, back in the 90s, I had written some reviews, a couple of reviews for, I don't even remember what CDs they were, but I wrote some reviews for an independent magazine back in my hometown. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee originally, so I did a couple of reviews for some independent magazine there. So, and along the way, even though it's not my main job being a journalist, it was just something I'd always sort of had done on the side, a little bit of creative writing, and of course writing in blogs. I used to write on like different kind of video game blogs and sites and forums, like what a lot of typical people do these days. But I felt like I had something in my history and background, some really good teaching instruction from my university days that I thought I could really articulate a good written message. And so I did some writing samples. I gave that to the J-Rock News team. And I said, is this fit to print? And they said, here's some rough areas, here's places you can improve. But gradually, I worked on those areas that I was getting in trouble with. And then I just eventually, got the necessary experience and everything to finally say, okay, here's my writing style, and also here's writing in a way so that it works for the team. And so that's kind of my story. It seems like it all happened really fast, but it's been such an amazing journey that it's got me to the point that, I tell you, I'm probably skipping ahead here because I know you probably got some other questions, but I finally got to that point where I was able to get an interview with these gals, Brats from Anime LA last year. So that was a really exciting moment. So it was just one of those things where it just started off as just saying yes to doors and opportunities that were opening up. And then, next thing I know, I'm getting to interview some amazing international rock stars.
I think that because you used the phrase there about sort of following it down the rabbit hole, and that certainly is what it sounds like you did. But at the same time, it was the fact that you had these little innate skills that you'd picked up prior, like you were drawing from that knowledge of having done reviews before. You were drawing from obviously the fact that you had a passion for music before. I mean, you were saying that you had been into sort of more dare I use the word classic? You could take that different ways, sort of classic rock, contemporary as well, but you'd like rock for over a period of time. So you already had an interest clearly in both journalism and of a form and in music. So when this happened, I'm assuming it just felt like a sort of natural progression, something where you probably thought, why wasn't I doing this before?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I don't see myself, I'm no Rolling Stones kind of writer, I'm still sort of in a journeyman phase. But there was definitely, just from my experience in life, getting to sort of realizing that there was a sort of connection between my passion for the music and also my penchant to just sort of want to write and communicate. So yeah, it just seemed like it was a good fit to put those things together, especially with this genre of music. I mean, I could probably talk about music industry. I think it also comes from the fact of growing up in Nashville, Tennessee. I was around a lot of music, and a lot of different types of music. Even though Nashville's known for country music, there's so much there. You can find just about any form of music there. So growing up in that atmosphere, and then just having this sort of ability to just sort of want to be able to effectively communicate through writing, it just sort of worked out that way. So
well, this is one of the things that it sort of brings me onto a question that I would maybe usually mention more towards the end, but I think it kind of now really hits me, the idea that you said a lot about the fact that Japanese music had really grabbed you in this period. I guess the big question, this is one where I perhaps know how I would articulate it, but everyone seems to have a very different answer to this question, is could you really say, in your own mind, what to you makes Japanese music special? When you hear it, what is special? What is different? What is it that makes it something where you can sort of view it as a whole thing that is worth
right.
Sort of framing?
Right, because it's one of those things where it's almost, even though I should be able to better articulate it, I really have to just come down to the fact that it's an emotional, it's a feeling that I get. Um,
Maybe a bit
it sort
nostalgic.
of, I would say, well, that's what I was about to get to, is that, like I was saying, when I first discovered it, the music, it made me feel like a kid again. You know, it tapped into something that I hadn't experienced in a very long time, and so that was really special. But just to sort of formalize it, it was the fact that I was hearing artists, and I think I don't want to be. I don't want to slam like the way music is gotten to be these days in the West.
You can be
Um,
honest.
well, I know there'll probably be some chatter about it. I
Whatever
mean,
you say,
there's
there'll be
it's
chat.
there. Yeah, there's always haters, but you know, it seems like, because before I discovered the Japanese rock for like the past 10 years, I was kind of just going back and listening to the stuff that I had experienced as a kid,
Yeah.
because I just felt like, and I think I'm not alone, especially for somebody like me who's a real rock guy. I mean, I grew up with the glam metal, the heavy metal, Metallica, and then into the 90s with the alternative scene. Um, and lately, it seems like that's an audience that's been underserved in our modern era. I just don't hear modern rock bands in the West that are even pushing into anything new. But what I heard from the Japanese rock artists is that they were really tapping into something that was familiar yet modern. And also, when you really listen to these artists, that it's clear that they've taken their culture and their history and their talents, and they've melded it in with what they've picked up from what is a very universal, but actually, kind of Western origins. If you go down the history of like rock music or just
Yeah.
music in general, but I mean, it's the things that we talk about. There is a technical level of precision that is really exciting to hear. There's a sharpness and a cleanness to the music. And actually, I'm fucking segue into another sort of anecdote that I got. So when I was discovering this music, I was taking it to some of my coworkers that I work with at my regular day job
That's always
outside
an
of writing.
interesting thing to try and do, yeah.
And I played some music for them. I played some of the songs, and I said, okay, what? Even though you can't understand the language, if you just had to guess at what the song was about, or what words or ideas you would say about it, what would that be?
Yeah.
And they would tell me, it's like, okay, well, I'm sort of seeing this and that about it. And then I would say, okay, well, let's look at the translation, how this song translates into English. And 9 times out of 10, what you experience, what you feel, what you think about the song is what the song was about.
I think that's
and
very
it's
true.
sort of this
Yeah.
it's this idea that the music really has this sort of universal language, and I think that's what also really pulled me in.
Well-written music certainly does. I mean, there has been some really fantastic examples. I mean, the one that I always go back to, I actually refer to it as the Yoshida-san effect, which is a Silent Siren song, Yoshida-san, where I initially reviewed it without really, because the lyrics were very fast, I wasn't really able to ascertain what it was about. And I said it sounded messy, and then someone showed me the lyrics. I was like, oh, it's actually meant to sound like hectic. So in that case, it was that I actually undercut it by trying to review it beyond that. But yeah, I think as a general, most songs, as you say, most well-written songs, you can get what's being conveyed through the mood alone. And now, one of the things that you mentioned there, which was quite interesting, I mean, I often say if someone tried to boil me down to a simple answer on what makes Japanese music so interesting, I would say it was the attention to writing, the fact that they actually care about sort of progressing writing rather than just looking for the most simple, cookie cutter, effective common denominator way to get a hit. But you did actually make an interesting point there, because you were talking about the fact obviously most contemporary music is from a Western background. With the music that we think of is sort of brought up from that rock and roll phase and subsequent developments of genre. However, it is interesting because I've been rather critical, and maybe I haven't worded this in such a clear way. I've been kind of critical of the fact that a lot, not all, but a lot of Western music, certainly the Western music that's pushed to the forefront, is going more and more towards simplifying. Whereas I feel that the Japanese bands, certainly Baby Metal, which I can see behind you, certainly with Baby Metal, they're an example of one of those groups who they've taken what was already there and they've taken the risk of trying to add things to it. It's that the concept that addition is very present in Japanese music, whereas subtraction is becoming more common in Western music. Japanese music adding, Western music was kind of subtracting. Would you say that's something that you've noticed yourself, or would you say it's more a form of stagnation with Western music?
Well, I remember seeing a critical review once that a lot of what we would consider modern music here in the West, that actually it was almost kind of a joke that you could take a lot of the top 10 songs, and if you measured them through like an algorithm, it turns out that they're all the same song. So that was kind of a joke. But I think that sort of gets to, I think you probably put it better than what I think I was experiencing prior to finding this music, is that there was a sort of sameness in a lot of Western music. There's this idea that it seems like, each kind of song that is being pushed out in music these days has a sort of here's the thing. Here's what I really noticed, and I don't want to get too political, but these are really some real pure thoughts about this. What I noticed is that after the big 2008 Great Recession, what I noticed is that a lot of companies, especially in the West, became very risk adverse.
Yeah.
So a lot of the producers, I think, and again, I'm not an industry person per se, I just write about it, so this is pure speculation, but it just seemed to me what I was getting is that a lot of the major labels and a lot of the companies out there were getting very risk adverse, and so they just wanted, when a certain kind of song would pop and be, big, then it was like, okay, we've got to make sure that every song that follows it is sort of similar to this. And I mean, that can kind of happen. I mean, it's always happened. We've always had like one-hit wonders, but it seems like this past decade, the industry has been so risk adverse that they've lost that what I grew up with, because what I grew up with was variety, the experimentation. We grew up with songs like Bohemian Rhapsody, from Queen, this incredibly experimental long song, and then also a lot of the songs that I really loved back in my youth that were like a lot of the progressive rock and progressive metal, Dream Theater, Rush, and those guys, and that kind of music where they were willing to push the limits. And
it was rewarded.
Western music,
yeah,
exactly, yeah. So I don't know why it's not being rewarded now, but maybe it's just sort of that modern, I have a few reasons. I think maybe it has to do with the fact that it's because of technology. It's been this double-edged sword with technology, where we're able to get access to so much music. So because there's so much supply out there, that means what the record labels are able to take from that has sort of dwindled down. So that's why you find that a lot of the top acts on the Billboard charts, you got your Taylor Swift, and a lot of the acts that are out there, they sort of have a sort of like, I guess we would call it like a lane that they stay in. But when I discovered the Japanese rock music, it was like these guys are willing to experiment. Yeah, sure, they have some of their wheelhouse songs, and of course, when you look at the charts in Japan, it's very obvious that like a "Make You Happy" kind of song is sort of what's expected. But once you just go down a layer and look at the next layer of what music they're putting out, you do find there's a richness there with the experimentation, with the idea of doing things that are a little bit more progressive and edgy.
And those layers are not necessarily hidden. Those layers are very accessible.
Right.
They're not selling as much as obviously the mainstream pop. And even the mainstream pop is, I think, more engaging. I mean, you look at... you mentioned Taylor Swift, and I think that's an interesting example, because I know a lot of people, you say Taylor Swift and they immediately just recoil. But I think there's an example to be... I would say both Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran are two artists who I can think of where if you take their original material when they started, I could listen to it and say, well, look, this isn't my thing, but it's music. It's music. You got a nice little tune, you're doing something. And in both cases, it's devolved into... Now, I'm not one of these people who says, oh, you have to use real instruments. If you can do digital music and it's good, that's fine. But it's devolved into all the musicalities being removed, both in the musicianship and the playing, to the point where now they are doing something which is, there's barely really any substantial music to it at all. But it is very efficient, effective. I say it's that subtraction once again.
Right.
I think that you made some interesting points there about certainly how the music industry has changed as well. I mean, I didn't so much think about the financial collapse in 2008, but you made a wonderful point about that, in that obviously that would have reprioritized the need for profit, which I think reshaped the industry a lot. One of the other things that and obviously technology as well, but we'll come to that in a minute. One of the other things I also noticed as well, and I remember seeing there was a series of graphs that were produced which were really interesting. Obviously, we expect the industry to change, but it was almost exactly to the month and the turn of the millennium, CD sales that had been rising like that virtually consistently immediately went down.
Right.
And so there was the public as well started to change their view. Obviously, at that point, MP3 was just starting to become a thing that people were regularly looking into. And, the industry wasn't ready for that sharp curve. So they fell behind, and they were already falling behind when the financial crisis came in, which further prioritized their need to push forwards. And then obviously the technological side, the fact that there's two sides to that. There's the side that now in a studio you can produce literally any sound. So the need to rely so much on normal musical factors becomes less. You can rely more on production. And I mean, one of the things, I've said this a lot for smaller artists, and this sounds very dismissive for someone who works with music, but just to be completely honest, musicians as a general are also happy with the fact that we can produce an album at home. You can self-record. You don't need a record company. You can self-publish. Everyone can have their own self-made album,
Right.
beautiful sound, publish it. And then at the same time, they ask why there's no money in music anymore. It's like, well,
Right.
simple economics here. It's like,
Economics,
you're all
yeah.
publishing. You're all publishing. And
Right.
this was kind of bring it to your point that there is such a plethora of music now available. So I think there's been a lot of things that have worked against the music industry as a general. Now, this is where Japan becomes a bit of a strange one, and I'm really interested in your opinion on this. We've talked a lot, and this comes up with the attitude towards publicity on YouTube and various things. A lot of Japanese record companies are very out of date in their mode of operation, but they've been somewhat saved by the fact that the public as a general seem to have a decent surplus income. People still do put their money, their wallets, into paying for music. So a lot of the record companies have been able to survive that. I'm wondering, obviously COVID's changed things a lot as well now. I'm wondering where you see the future of the Japanese music industry. Do you think it's aiming towards a similar sort of out of touch collapse between the business side and the public, or do you think that there is a way that this situation is going to work to their benefit? Maybe, the whole COVID thing.
Sure, right. Yeah, because, as the second largest music market in the world, they've always been sort of fortunate in that I think because on one side, they had their culture, which was very much into being able to get access to like the physical media.
Yeah.
And then they also I think they kind of saw what was happening in the West. And so they put measures in place, especially certain companies we know about were very restrictive early on, and I think they just got ahead of it to clamp down on piracy, to limit digital distribution, and to keep the customers going to the physical media. But with that also,
do you think that's what it was? You think that was kind of a response to the issues in the Western market, that perhaps they were trying to avoid a similar like music sharing issue?
I think so. Because their culture was a bit more, and this, even still, there are places that when you go to like certain shops in Japan, and I found this out in my trip, you still have to be ready to pay cash because they may not have, credit card or Visa or
To
any
be
kind
clear,
of card
for
machines.
anyone watching, that is the vast majority of places, and we're talking about supermarkets sometimes, big chain supermarkets who will look confused when you show them a card. I mean, most of them now kind of accept it, but just cash is considered to be normal. So yeah, I mean, 100%. And also the other one, I'll just add this because you'll probably notice as well. If you see an advert for a business, like on a billboard, I would say pretty much 9 times out of 10, they have a fax number. I mean,
Wow.
it's not the 80s, but they will
Yeah,
have a
because
fax number on their
because you're
advert.
there in Japan, because you're there in Japan, you probably are seeing that, that their culture. I don't want to say that they're slow to adapt to certain changes in the world,
But
but
perhaps resistant.
particularly with music,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, because I think with the industry there, the businesses there, sort of got lucky with the fact that they had a culture of people who were not in a hurry to jump to the digiul realm.
I
That gave
agree.
them just
I
enough
agree.
of breathing room to see what was happening over here and say, "Ooh, we better get out in front of this and clamp down on it." Um,
100%
but
agree. Yeah.
I think as all things go, with technology, technology is sort of a process. This also has to do with kind of my day job as a, my stock and trade careers in IT. So I've also been an industry
Wow.
watcher in tech. And a lot of what you see in tech is that once that sort of genie is out of the bottle, there's almost no stopping it. So I think it's just a matter of time now for Japan to also sort of have this experience where they are going to have to get comfortable with the idea of the digital distribution. But they're in a good place because now that has sort of been worked out with, a lot of the digital platforms that have come alive now. You got your iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music. And I'm not trying to advertise with these guys. I'm just trying to say that
No,
a
it's
lot
fair.
of
It's
the
fair. Yeah.
lessons,
Yeah.
a lot of the lessons that the American companies learned, now Japan gets to benefit. And so I think going forward, yes, they will end up getting more into the, having to do a lot of digital stuff, but that just means that they're just going to have to make up for it in other areas. Because in fact, this is an opportunity now that we're reporting on a lot with J-Rock News. Is what we're seeing is that now we have the technology where we can see the live streams of our artists. We just posted an article with some free live streams this month. So, and of course, coming up pretty soon, we're going to be seeing, there's also the paid for live streams. So I think they'll be able to get back some of the loss from the physical media with the fact that there is a growing worldwide audience that is willing to pay for watching live streams.
Well, the interesting, just to cover a couple of points you made there, because you made an interesting point in regards to the technology, actually. That made me think of something else, which is that statistically, I found out recently, I think this might have been last year actually, that Japan was actually registering unusually high positive figures for music streaming, as well as also being the primary market for physical sales as well. And the kind of the suggestion I think that most people have taken from this is that this has been, again, kind of the attitude of the public has been bailing out the more outdated attitude of the record companies, in that the public still want to buy the physical media just enough because of the fact that it's a physical media, you want to buy it as a thing, that kind of, if you like, the cultural thing that you were mentioning, but also because technologically everyone's connected, internet connections here are fantastically quick, everyone's got a phone all the time. People are also doing streaming just because it's more convenient. You don't want to lug a CD around. No one's going to be walking around with a Discman. So as a result,
Right.
I think that they've kind of been bailed out as a little bit by that as well. Now, in regards to the progress of the industry and the sort of COVID era, because you were mentioning about the video live streams. I've seen a couple of them myself and really enjoyed them. The first one I saw was a paid for one. Big thank you to CMC for helping me out with that. It was a paid for band-maid one that I saw, which is going to be part of a video I'm going to be doing. We're going to be reviewing and talking about this whole phenomenon. But that was a really fantastic show, and I was surprised how enjoyable it actually was. However, what's been coming to my mind is the fact that when you have a touring artist, as I'm sure you know, especially if they're touring abroad, massive overheads. It's a really expensive thing to do. It takes a lot of money for the record company. It is also their main source of profit, but it's a risk-reward thing. With the live streams, this is now a new market, a new era, and it's going to be something I think is going to be around. I think it's going to stick around in some context, even after the COVID situation is hopefully resolved.
Sure.
And what's really struck me is that there has been this split between some record companies have taken what I would consider to be a greed model, where they've effectively been charging, probably 50% of what their normal ticket price would be, considering having zero overheads for doing this. Whereas some have been really considering what the market is and pricing themselves realistically, like 1,500 yen. That's about $15, I think. So that's a reasonable price, I think. Why not charge much less? Because the truth is that you are effectively doing a world tour every time you do a live stream, because anyone can see it. So why not set the price low and encourage people to share tickets, to buy a ticket for their friend, to basically invite their friend to a live stream? Why not get yourself out there? Because you don't have the overhead. So why not absorb that lack of expense into what the customer is paying, and hopefully expand to more people watching? I was wondering what your opinion is on this, because this is a totally new area of questioning, a totally new area of marketing that a lot of people are considering. And I'm wondering whether this is also an outdated concept, maybe coming over, the idea of just charging it because you can.
I don't think so, because I think what we're going to see, and this happens in a lot of new industries. I've always seen this over the years. Whenever a new medium comes along, there is a sort of really, businesses just have to play a guessing game.
Yeah,
and it's a combination of several things. First of all, there is who's the artist. If the artist is a really big name, okay, maybe we can get away with charging a little bit more because they're already established. We know we're going to get in a very set number of fans. The second thing is, because this is new, there have been some startup costs that these companies have had to eat. So they've had to renovate, some studios and venue spaces. They've had to actually buy the actual technology. You can't use your traditional concert hall equipment. You got to get some additional, and I'm not an expert on this. I'm sure there are people who would know specifically, but you do have to get the technology that will allow a concert or a studio hall to be able to get the sound appropriately from all the different instruments, put it into these new kind of mixers, and then it's got to be. Something's got to be done with upload.
I would argue they have that already. I'd say if they have.
I don't think so.
Well, I mean, to be honest, to record the sound of a small room, a record company, any size room, a record company should be able to supply that without any trouble. I think the startup costs might be more in. I wonder if the startup costs involve more in the platforming of streaming it, whether there's some sort of like marketing costs that go into it that don't go into a live show.
There probably was that because you look at the different services that are out there. Obviously, YouTube had already sort of built this platform, so for the artists that were able to take their existing offering of entertainment and be able to get that mixed into a feed for YouTube upload worked pretty well. But there are new services like Zyko is a big one that's being used over there in Japan. So I don't know technically behind the scenes what they do, but I imagine they may have some requirements. They may require some of the businesses to say, we're on this kind of platform, we're using this type of software, so you got to make sure that your little mixers are running to this port, and there's it may seem simple, but I've always found that when it seems simple, it's actually behind the scenes where a lot of the complication comes up. And I mean, we see this, just for you probably being a streamer, you probably kind of run into some issues. So the point is, though, that there is something that businesses have to pay for to get the ball rolling. Now, once it gets rolling, once all these things sort of flatten out, it comes back to the basic economics of the supply and demand. I think once they will find a happy middle, and I think some of the bands that are charging too much are eventually going to go, yeah, we'll probably charge you too much there, and we'll bring it down. And maybe some newer bands will say, hey, I think we could probably charge you a little bit more. So there's going to be a shakeout, and there's going to be a leveling off. But also on that, if I just carry out this conversation a little bit, I think what we're going to see, because like you said, every time they do one of these, it's like a world tour. So my guess is what they're going to do is they're probably going to use it as sort of like a bookend kind of deal where they will tour, especially for the Japanese artists, they will probably tour locally around Japan, and then at the end of their tour, they'll have a big live stream event with in front of actual live audiences. That's where I think they're going, and then along the way they may reverse that and they may do the live stream first in front of a live audience, or they may just do a live stream from a studio.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be. I think they're going to figure out a way to sort of keep kind of those things going, because they're probably not going to want to do a live stream for every show, and I think they're going to be. But just to kind of round out this conversation, once all this pandemic stuff is over, and I'm no doctor, but my hope is that the world will heal this year is what I'm praying for.
I think we're all hoping that.
I'm betting by the end of this year we will be wanting to get out. We're going to want to go back to those concert halls and venues, and we're going to want to see all these fabulous artists live and up close with our friends. So I think there's going to be a demand. People are going to want to get back out. People want to get out there in the free spaces. People are going to want to jump in mosh pits and bang their heads again with their friends. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good that'll be coming later on.
I think, I mean, once again, to sort of conclude that point, I think that there is this this feeling that, like you say, people were going to be so happy to go out to the concerts, but I think the overhang of this is going to be a positive one, because the people who up to now, you've heard them, I've actually heard some people who've felt almost that they've benefited from this, because they're like, oh, I live in an area, my favourite band will never visit me, or I have to travel further than I can afford to see them, and they're like, well, actually now I can kind of see them live. But I think you made a really interesting point there, actually, about the idea of them doing like a tour in Japan, like a domestic tour, and then at the end doing a final show that is broadcast to the world. The idea, of course, being that is kind of like a little bit of it's like them testing the water to see, okay, so shall we pay for a world tour? It's like, oh, okay, this did much better than expected. Okay, we can pay for a world tour off the back of this and make some extra profit. So I think that actually, there would be some commercial benefit to it, as well as kind of like a test, if people like this, then maybe we'll pack in a world tour off the bat. So I think that I really hope that you're right. I think you're right, and I really hope that you're right, that things are going to get much better this year, because I got some concerts that were cancelled on me, and I desperately want to go out and see some shows for a change. But,
well, if I can just interject on that, as a matter of fact, and as we know, for those of us who are band-maid fans...
that one was behind your head. I didn't see that, sorry.
Yeah.
There it is.
I sadly had to report that band-maid canceled their Budokan concert.
Yes.
Now, if it hadn't been for all this pandemic stuff, I would probably be in Japan right now, because I had my tickets. I was looking forward to it. I really wanted to see them do their first big Budokan show.
Me too.
So it was
Me too.
it was a little that's probably we're right there. It's just like, oh, this is so sad, and I know it was probably a tough decision for them and very unfortunate that they had to cancel. However, me wanting to be the optimist, I am absolutely certain that at some point in the future they will try again for Budokan, and when they do, me and a lot of other Americans, we're going to be flying over to see that concert.
I suspect that you're probably going to get a few artists, band-maid included, who will turn something like that into a 2-night show, because there'll be such a demand from both the people who were going to go and new people, that I think a lot of those sorts of shows will probably end up turning into 2-nighters instead. So I not only think that they will do it, I think it will probably be extended to a bigger version of what it was before, especially with Pony Canyon involved. Pony Canyon certainly are the sort of record company you can imagine Budokan is going to be one they'll find quite easy to book. I definitely agree. So don't worry on that one. It's just obviously it's always horrible waiting. I feel like the kid waiting for Christmas, but no one knows what date it is. So it's a bit of a difficult one. That I was going to ask though, because obviously your affiliations to the great artists that we both know and share through this channel are well known. I was kind of intrigued though. a couple of questions. First of all, is there any artists who you would say are up and comers who you notice? Obviously, you've mentioned about Bratz. Any artists who you see at the moment who maybe aren't so well known, who you're picking as a possibility for something to go on to greatness later?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, and I'm going to once again plug the site because I just
Go for
had
it.
published my recent article for a band called Trident. Now, these three young ladies are making sound that is almost above their level. They have a very, it's like what we were talking about before, where you can tell there's that experimentation and the progression in the music. The lead singer, she's got a powerful voice, and it always impresses me to see a lead singer that can also jam away on the guitar. So, they're definitely one to check out. Please check out that article that just got published about Trident. They're ones who are actually, I published it because they're going to be going on tour there in Japan, and as part of that, they're promoting their first full album, Advanced Generation. So, yeah, definitely check out Trident. Let's see, who else has been on my
I will
list?
just quickly mention before we move on from that, because they came up from girls rock band Kakamai, didn't they? And that was a band who when they were them, I heard a lot of hype about them. I listened to them and I was like, there's a lot of potential, but it didn't seem like the sound they quite worked out what the sound was. Then with Trident, I think my first review of them, I said it kind of sounded to me like a three-piece band-maid, and in a way it does. I mean, I don't obviously want to sort of sound like I'm damning them with a comparison, but I think that they have that sound, but they also have, whereas band-maid benefit from having the big, having a five-piece and being able to have that intricate sound. I think there's a clarity to Trident's sound, which is nice. They managed to do the same thing, but with that real clarity that you can only get from a three-piece, where everything is quite nicely separated. Everything has its own place. So, yeah, I certainly agree. And, I'll pop a link in the description below, so if anyone wants to check out your review, then please check that out as well to get a little bit more information. But, yeah, you had another artist that you were going to plug at me.
Well, and you've already reviewed one of their songs. It's Nemophilia. They're a really neat group. They came together with a few former members, Saki from Mary's Blood, and I can't remember the guitarist names from Lisa X, and the other members have been in previous bands. Now that they're together with the lead singer Mayu, they are putting out some awesome music. They first started doing some covers. They did an incredible Iron Maiden cover that was a lot of fun to watch. Now they're doing their own music. They started to tour last year to get out there, and then the pandemic hit. So they just went back into the studios, into their own separate little studios to film some things. They also did covers. Here's the wrong thing. You got to check out this video. They did a Kiss cover. They did Detroit Rock City, and they also painted themselves up to look like Kiss. And it just blows me away. So definitely check out Nemophilia. They're ones that when I do get a chance to go back to Japan, I definitely hope to see them as well, because they're a lot of fun.
I remember, although I don't remember the details of the song, I do remember when I heard them, I was like, actually, this is something I need to check out more of, so that's when I'll go back to. I've been meaning to do a few album reviews recently so I can take in more of these artists, so they might be one who I might just sort of dig into an album's worth of material, though I'm guessing they don't have a debut album yet. Do they have it?
Not yet. They got a few singles out, but eventually I think they are planning to do a full album. I just don't have the details yet.
That's not a problem. We'll dive into that eventually, and I'm sure that you'll be the first person there when they do. So that's
I'm watching them, yeah.
So here's one that this is the one that this is always a fun question to ask, because it's not one that everyone can answer, but I get the feeling that you've got a varied enough taste that you'll be able to answer this. Now, we know that you like your rock. We know that you know the good rock artists. We know that we know what a good rock song sounds like. What's an artist who you like, who you think would surprise people? An artist who you enjoy, who you think, that's kind of different from my usual sort of thing.
Right, that's a challenge.
Well,
actually, I got a few of them.
Yeah, more than one's fine.
And we were talking about having the media, so I have a bit of physical media here. This is Overworld, their last album. This is an incredible track. The songs on here, they're more. They rock a little bit, but they're a little bit more modern. They have a little bit more of the electronic sound. But this is an amazing album. If you're wanting something that's a little bit more pop modern. But and by pop, I mean it's more. There's a little bit more of the synth involved in some of their music. It's a little bit
They
more
use a lot of
special
production and
editing and
stuff.
effects.
Yeah.
So they use a lot of production, but it's done very well. It's a really great album to just listen to and sort of chill to. So that one may be a bit of a surprise. I think another couple of surprises. Of course, we already know this. We're both fans of Sai.
So glad
This
that you had that to
was
hand.
this is the odd choice because, like I said, even though I'm a rock guy, there's something about just getting a little bit. When I heard Fujiyama Disco, I was just like, that's the song to groove to. And I started, went down their rabbit hole as well. And we talk about them being more of a pop rock band, but they have just enough of an edge in rock that it makes the sugary sweetness of the pop acceptable for me.
I think that's fair, yeah.
Yeah, so that might surprise people that I would be into them, but along those lines. So just me name drop a few others. Leo Airi, her song Answer, that I think you reviewed a while back, a really good song. That's, of course, more of a J-pop song.
Stunning production. Yeah, really beautifully
But yeah,
produced.
really well done. But actually, if you go back and get her, and I don't know if I have the album here, but her original album, I don't have it, but one of her older albums that has a song on it called Sabrina is really good. So yeah, she's also very good. And now one that may be kind of expected, but may not be unexpected for me, one you need to be talking about more is you need to be talking more about Lisa. So for the anime fans out there, fans of Demon Slayer, the 2 songs that she's done for Demon Slayer are just amazing. I mean, she was another one who came up in my initial fall down the rabbit hole. So even some of her like classic songs like Crossing Field and Oath Sign, really awesome songs. So yeah, definitely check out Lisa if you haven't already. And I think that would be kind of one that people would expect from me, that I would be into somebody who's so mainstream like that. But she is really good. The Demon Slayer songs, the recent one, Omura, and of course Garange, are just great songs.
I was talking to a friend of mine after I did a Lisa review last year, actually. I think it was on the previous channel. It was part of the Live Week thing that dragged on for over a month. So I covered one of her songs, and then I was speaking to one of my friends here in Japan, a Japanese friend, and he sort of laughingly said, he's like, yeah, you know a lot of her songs, you just don't know you know them. And then he played me a couple. I was like, okay, yeah. it's like one of those artists where you hear them, you think, I wasn't aware that had been in the background of my life so much over recent years. So yeah, she's definitely sort of mainstream, but I think mainstream in a way that there is, and this is one of the things that I think, coming around to our earlier point, is very innately true of Japanese music, is that you can find, and I'm not saying this is completely devoid in the West, but mostly, in Japan, you can find mainstream music that you can say, well, this is mainstream, this could be a number one, but actually, you know what, that's a pretty damn good song. And so for me, that's a big part of the joy of it. I do think things like Lisa's definitely, Leo Lear is certainly one that would be worth me going into. I'm glad you've mentioned a few of these things, Nemophilia as well. These are all artists that actually I have been thinking I need to get back to. So maybe the upcoming ones. See, you've even inspired my choices, which I love to hear. And
great.
For anyone at home, you should be writing these down. You're getting a lot of listening suggestions right now. I would say I did want to cover this point again because a lot of people obviously know that I very much enjoy the Silent Sirens just catalogue as a general. It's one that it's most of the time I feel like most of the people I talk to about Silent Siren, I feel like I'm introducing them, because I've said myself, I'm totally aware and I understand and I have no problem with the fact that they're not really something that's going to work on a Western market. Maybe in a small way, but not in a big way. Now, the phrase that I keep on using, and this is something I wanted to run past you and see if you agree. For me, their quality is that they are effectively, for whatever they do, they have a range of emotion. They do sort of change up their style, but they are consistently accessible. But when you get into it, you hear that there's a lot of qualities in there. It's something where when you listen, you can find a lot, but it doesn't really challenge you much on the first listen. It welcomes you in and then gives you the reward of quality afterwards. I mean, would you say that, is that your sort of experience with them? What do you think actually makes them work as a sound?
Right, because most of their songs are definitely in that range of pop.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that they have a sort of backing where they're I don't know if it's intentional or maybe it just comes out just through the sheer talent of those artists that you can tell they're putting in an additional layer there. Something that's really kind of hard to describe. It's sort of like they know that they want to have a very sort of modern, accessible pop sound, but then they do a few little things. They add a little bit of hooks and riffs in the arrangement that sort of gives it that sort of. Well, here's probably the best way to explain it. A lot of times when I listen to a really good song, when I listen to it on the second or third time, and I think maybe this has something to do with the way our brains work memory-wise, it's almost like I'm hearing something that I didn't hear before the first time. So definitely with Silent Siren, they definitely have that replayability so that when you go back and listen to them again, you get something new out of it. And I think for me, that's what hooks me with them, is that every time I listen to their song, it's like, oh, I didn't notice that little bass line before, or I didn't really notice how the hi-hat was being hit, particularly there. So it's just these little things. It's just these little bit of nuggets.
Really. Yeah.
Little subtleties, little nuggets that gives you just a little joy to find and discover those things again when you listen back to their songs. But yeah, I agree with you that they would be a challenge for your typical Western market, especially the way things are today. Although I think they would have potential, especially my favorite song off, again, off Mixed 10th, off this album, was the one that they did with Amy from Poppin' Party, Up to You. I don't think you were too crazy about that.
I know you mentioned that.
That song, man, that song just rocks. So if they pepper their next album with a few more hard rock songs, I think they'll find. And of course, as we all know, they're friends with band-maid. So there's definitely potential there for some working together and crossover. Hopefully,
I was going to say I would love to see. I think more so than, although I actually really enjoy the idea of Silent Siren doing something different, but kind of I feel the same about them doing a rock song as I do about band-maid doing a pop song, which is that I want to hear it on occasion just to show that you can. That's kind of my way of looking at both bands crossing over. Certainly, though, I would love. I mean, it was really cool to hear the whole. I don't know so much about Poppin' Party, but after hearing No Girl, No Cry, it was really cool to hear them doing another song with Amy. However, I would really love to see some sort of crossover between Silent Siren and band-maid, just probably for my own sick biased pleasure. But I can imagine that being something where you could go in so many directions with that. It would be fun, and plus, I don't exactly know, but I would like to see someone making Psyche and Sue's voice work together. That would be the most intriguing duet that I'd ever heard, to hear them both singing together.
Yes, I agree.
That would be really fascinating. So there's a lot of potential in there, and a lot of multi-talented musicians between the two bands. So that would be interesting. I suspect due to their the record companies that they're with, that it would never happen. Yeah. I don't think their record companies are compatible. Especially, I don't think Pony Canyon are going to play along with that anytime soon. But you never know. Someday in the future, they might be able to do something with that. But
we can always hope. If their music people are watching, it's me, my sin. Come on, make it happen.
It's the year of hope. Don't let us down, all right?
Yes.
Well, so I'm going to round this one off by asking you a couple of little questions that I just want to sort of finish with. I mean, first of all, you've told us about up-and-coming artists. You've told us about what you're looking forward to in the future. What is in the future for you? What do you see happening yourself? You want to come back to Japan, which is really great. Are there any ambitions, any things that you're really looking forward to, that you're excited about, that maybe you want to mention as well?
Well, I don't want to give away too much. I have a few ideas. I do want to continue to, of course, grow in my writing skills. And really, I just want to keep being able to provide the people out there with this, information about the tours and events that are going to be coming up and hopefully coming back. So I'm just hoping to just continue this sort of growth and experience this amazing genre of music like we've all been doing. I am sort of looking at some additional possibilities once the world opens back up again of branching out and doing some more things. But here's the big answer to that. To look forward, I sort of have to look back at the reason why I got into this in the first place, because I wish there had been somebody 10, 20 years ago to tell me, hey, you may want to check this out. There's something going on here that you want to check out and get into. So my approach, my idea going forward is that I want to be the sort of advocate that gives these great artists the exposure that they deserve. I think it's time. I'll even put it this way, just to have another little history lesson, which you probably know about from Japan. There was the situation long time ago when the trading ships came to Japan, and the European traders said, "Open up, Japan! Open up your gates, or we're going to blow them down. We want to trade with you." So that would be sort of my message to Japan and the world, and that's where I'm hoping to be able to just continue to do, is just get the exposure and the awareness out that, hey, there's something here for you. When I talk about this music and share this music with people, I never get a bad reaction. Even my brother, who's like the biggest music snob, even he was like, yeah, they're pretty good. So
if you can do it with family, you're definitely winning.
Yeah. So that's just where I want to go to next, just to continue to talk about these great artists, share it with the world, and hopefully that there's somebody else out there like me who wants to feel like a kid again and experience all this great music.
There are so many things that are so true about that. I mean, I do think that we've talked about this previously in previous podcasts, so I won't belabor this point, but the whole thing about the difference between how Western markets who are used to having everything in English are now opening up to the possibilities of listening to things in foreign languages, how the world is getting smaller and so people are feeling more interested to hear different things. I think, and as well as the Western music becomes a little bit more common denominator, as there's always going to be, therefore, a growing amount of people who are going to want to be wowed. So I agree, it's nice to be sort of a conduit to that world for our people, to be able to advise people in the right direction, point them in the right direction, give them interesting things to check out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that K-pop would have become as big as it is? So now I think it's time for J-Rock to sort of steal some of that thunder. And even on that note, when I hear people say, oh, they don't, I don't know the language. Well, here's a band, Love Bites, all English for these songs. Yep. And then also, another one of my favorites here, to continue name dropping. I know it's probably annoying people, but this is Cold Rain. This is the Side Effects CD.
Don't actually
awesome
know
music. And again, got to check out these guys. They also have all English. Their lead singer there, he just decided, hey, when we're starting to span up, let's just try and just do all of our songs in English. And they're very popular. They've already done a Budokan show a few years back. So, yeah, just because you don't know the language doesn't mean, like I said, it feels like it's a universal language. And there are some artists out there, of course, we hear this in the band-maid songs and the Brat songs, they throw in the English as that sort of little mystery to unravel. So, there's definitely
one of the great
to look for.
One of the great weirdnesses of Japanese contemporary music going all the way back has been that thing of, here's a little English line, we're going to throw this in. I love the fact that's always been there. It used to confuse me when I was younger and I was first getting into their Japanese music, but certainly now it's kind of got a charm. It's almost like a trope that you expect. And it's nice as well, like you say, to hear bands who are doing music completely in English. So if the lyric thing is a genuine concern, maybe that's a good way of getting into it, a good way of allowing yourself in. I do think that the K-pop thing, as happy as I am for them, I think it's because the music is a general coming out of Korea. Not all of it, but a lot of it is very much, again, in that sort of formulated pop form that is popular right now. And the K-pop thing, I think, ever since Gangnam Style 2012 put Korea a bit on the map for contemporary music, they're having a resurgence. They're having a good era, but I wonder if they are so much of the time that they won't be able to stay relevant moving forwards. However, the one thing I would say is that although Japan as a general, it's had its little moments of breaking into Western culture, certainly during the 90s was when it started. One of the things that I like is that Japanese music seems to have maintained this thing of always being there ever since it really broke into the Western scene. It's sort of maintained a small but consistent high quality presence. So I just hope that, as you say, I hope that grows. I hope that builds into something more. I would say this has been a really fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for this. It's been
Yeah.
really great to hear your
Mhm.
opinions, really great to get to know yourself better. As always with these, well, most of these, it's the first time I'm actually talking to the person. The same thing for yourself now. Now, we're going to go off and do a separate little video now after this one, which everyone else can find out about when I post it. But yeah,
Right.
so I just want to say a big thank you for coming on here and answering all these
My
questions
pleasure.
and telling us all about your own story as well. And
Right.
yeah, again, everyone, please
Yeah.
do check out his writings. It's, as many of you know, I'm a little bit picky about some of the journalism that we see online. Some of it is rather hyperbolic, some of it is rather pandering. If you want to hear someone who's actually going to write something interesting with an honest opinion, here's your man. So I'll leave some
Thank you.
links, like
Yeah,
I
we have
mentioned, at the
a.
bottom as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say one last thing. Just we have a great team over at J Rock News, and if anyone out there is also, if you feel like you have the writing bug and you feel like you can add to the conversation, we're always looking for more volunteers. So be sure to send some writing samples to info@jrocknews.com. I learned from them. It's there's an old-fashioned saying, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So great team over there. And yeah, they're one of the reasons why I'm able to be here today. So thanks so much for the conversation, Howard. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and fantastic. Yeah, like I say, do check out J-Rock News. Thank you yourself, and thank you at home for watching and listening to us talk. If you've made it to the end, then like I say, you're certainly in the mood for more journalism, then we've got it for you. Like I say, links in the description below. Also, links to all the normal stuff. I always have to say a big thank you to our patrons because we're not monetized, and so you guys are keeping us afloat and alive. Obviously, the social medias, if you want to follow us on any of those there, you can. Do check us out on Discord, actually, because Discord, there's always a conversation going on. And if you're a sort of person who likes to natter about music, then there will be people of all tastes to natter to on our Discord. And so, yeah, thank you so much to you. Thank you, Andrew. And until I see you, hopefully...
Matane.
Yeah, Matt. Then I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it my traditional way, which isn't even Japanese. For now, ciao, ciao.